This is the last set of notes for the Dark Ages. We actually did this in a combination of Tuesday and Wednesday, but we're going to finish them up and we'll be on my YouTube tonight. There you go. So we're going to start here with our first slide, which is title and essential question and all that kind of stuff. So here we go. So our main goal for today is to describe the causes and results of the Black Death that we kind of investigated last week. And I didn't have you guys write a summary paragraph, but if you want to, it will help you in the long run. So here is our title, Still in the Dark Ages. It's the final one, so I called it the end, and we're going to learn a lot of it. So here we go. Our essential question is to find out what the Black Death is, how it spread, how it affected Europe, etc. So this is the main kind of title for the section, is the Black Death. Black Death, well, it's a disease that spread from Asia, China specifically, all the way to Europe. How it was brought over was how the disease actually starts is in the belly of a rat. They eat but kind of like bad food, and it kind of goes into their stomach, and it makes this bacteria, and it goes into their blood, and a flea goes onto the rat, bites them, gets that blood, and then will jump off to another animal or human, and suck their blood, and it will get like kind of transferred. These rats that had this disease and the fleas get onto boats that are coming from China, and they get to Europe, and from the Middle East. They get to Europe, and they kind of spread everywhere. This is in 1346. It's right after the Crusades, so most of the people that are coming back from Asia are from the Crusades. So that's why it kind of came from Asia and China. It starts in the south, as you can see from the little skeleton guy. In the islands, and it goes north very, very, very quickly, year after year after year. In about 5 years, it kills about 25 million people. Total, it ranges from about 40 million to about 90 million people, and that's about 1/3 of the population of Europe at the time. You can notice that there are some areas that did not get affected. That's mostly because of mountains. Pyrenees, the Carpathian, the Urals, the Alps, kind of help those areas not get hit, if that makes sense. So you would think that maybe, the peasants would be the only ones that really got affected because they're super poor. They can't afford doctors. They are very dirty, living in filth and kind of stuff like that. But all classes are affected. Peasants, nobles, members of the church, men, women, children, kings, queens, does not matter. They all got it. Even the Pope got it. So nobody was exempt. This is a picture of what it might look like. These are nobles. You can tell because they have nice bedding and pillows and stuff. And there's a doctor behind them trying to use herbs to kind of get rid of the bad air. So there were a lot of theories of how this was starting back then. Some of them range from punishment from God, bad air, which is why they kept herbs on them and flowers and stuff. They had to burn the bodies to get rid of them. They thought maybe it was the pets at one time because of the fleas jumping from one place to one place. There's just a lot of theories that were going around, and none of them are right because they didn't have microscopes, so they didn't know what a bacteria was or germs or whatever. So they didn't fend very well against this disease. It actually ends primarily because they start to clean up themselves and clean up their towns, and then it starts going away. So this is the disease, or this is how it started and all that kind of stuff and how it spread. But what is this? What are the effects? So first things first, breakdown in society and in families. The parents abandon kids, priests abandon followers, kings abandon peasants. Like everybody's like, I don't want to get the disease, stay away from me. They even mark the houses like in this picture with a black X of people who have it so that you can stay away and not get the disease and stop it from spreading. So this is what was happening. Everybody was going crazy at this time, and it was not great. It was not a very good time to be alive. So much so that even people were not even doing burials or funerals. They were just like throwing bodies into graves or burning them or throwing them in the rivers and stuff like that. It was not great. These are pictures of what happens is that this is the bacteria. It's called the Black Death because your skin would literally turn black wherever you got infected, and fingers and toes because you don't really need those. It would literally kill the nerves and the muscles in it, and that's why your skin would turn black. And eventually, parts of your body would fall off, which is kind of gross. So, artwork changed, of course, as well. We get a lot more skeletons and death, grim reapers stuff going on. We have plague doctors who wear all of this stuff to protect themselves. Gloves, hats, robes. You got a stick to keep them away. They would put herbs into the beak of the mask. There was a lot of things where they would not get it because they had all these protections. And if you know the song Ring Around the Rosie, all of that is about the Black Death, about how, they would all fall down and die. They would burn the bodies and have posies or roses or whatever in their pockets. So there you go. That is socially. What happens economically is a little bit different. First thing that happens economically is we get the end of feudalism. Peasants now had to work harder to make up for everybody that was dying. They had to, like if your neighbor died, you'd have to take over for what they had. You still had to pay all the taxes, even more because they were doing it. So there was a lot of, things that people didn't want to do now because they didn't have a long time to live. So they demanded that they be paid eventually, the peasants did, for doing all of this work. And before they were kind of doing the work so they could get protection from invasions and Vikings or whatever, but now they didn't need that anymore. They had new weapons, so they didn't need knights. They didn't need protection. They're not going to stop protection from the Black Death anyway, so who cares? So they decided they needed money in order to survive and to live and things like that. So that effectively ended feudalism, because feudalism, remember, is it's a political system, but the economics is a very trade nature system, which I will trade you this if you give me that, as opposed to a work system where you would get paid for doing something that they tell you to do. Very different. So feudalism ends. Other factors that led to the end of feudalism: the Crusades united everybody, common enemy, easier to work with. There's not any more of those classes. Kings aren't in charge anymore. Magna Carta limited the power of kings so that kings couldn't rule over you as much. And again, like I said, new technology, like the longbow here, made knights less important. So that made protection, they could get easier and easier. Other things that happen, this creates new jobs and specialized jobs like carpentry and blacksmithing and artists and things like that. Before this, most people were farmers, as we saw. But as time went on and the end of feudalism, more jobs became available. People could now start making money, not being a farmer, no longer had to rely on feudal lords or kings or anything like that, and do what they wanted to do. So they became specialized in things that they like building stuff or making things or painting or whatever. So a lot of new jobs start to come out of this time period, called job specialization. But the Black Death was not the only thing that was happening in the Dark Ages. We also have wars. A specific war was called the 100 Years' War. And yes, it lasted about 100 years, actually more than 100 years, about 116 years. And how it started is that a French king died, and the English king, who was, they were ancestors of William the Conqueror, William of Normandy, right, who came from France. They said that they were related to him, so they should own this one part. And the French said, no, this is ours. It's an area known as Flanders, which you don't need to know, but they're known for their wool and stuff like that. That's what it's all about. It's all about trade and money, basically. And so they got into a fight, French versus English, because of this. And there is a guy named Henry V. He's not the one that, does the king, but he joins sides and stuff like that with the French, I think. But that's kind of all he does. The main person that you want to remember is Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc, it was on the French side, and she helped the French lead them to many victories. She became a general. Women were not allowed in the army, so they kind of found out and made an exception, but she dressed up as a man for a very long time. Does very well, wins lots of victories. Joan of Arc later is captured by the English, burnt at the stake for being a witch because she had a prophecy of her doing so well from God. She said it was from God, of how well she was going to do as in the army. So they burned her as being a witch for all these prophecies and stuff. Her death, though, was not in vain. The French basically inspired them, and she was seen as what we call a martyr, died for the cause, and they used her as inspiration to not really win the war, but at least win a lot of battles. The French would end up losing, and the English would win, mostly because of the new technology in weapons, which is cannons and not necessarily guns yet, but the longbow and all that. And finally, the Reconquista. In the early 700s AD, Muslim invaders, sort of the same ones that were in the Holy Land during the Crusades, also invaded the Iberian Peninsula, which is where Spain is now. And Christians did not like this. They did the same thing during the Crusades. They try and kick everybody out. The way they do it is called the Inquisition. They basically take people up, demand that they change to Christianity. If they don't, they torture them through various methods of torture. A lot of people did change to Christianity, and they took over the whole entire area. They actually created Portugal and Spain, the countries. And this effort to regain this peninsula is known as the Reconquista, or the Reconquest. It's very similar to the Crusades, and it happens around the same time. And I believe that's the last slide, but I think there may be a brain snack. Yep. So we got a brain snack.
Are coming. Brains.
All right, this brain snack is called Switch It Up. It sounds weird, but I wanted you to pick 3 important words from the last section and write them in a little on the side column in your left hand and your right hand. And it'll help you remember because you're kind of using both sides of your brain. And that's how you remember all of this stuff. So that was just to help you remember important things from today. But that includes the notes for the Dark Ages. So make sure you study all of this. The test will be tomorrow on Friday, September 13th. It's Friday. Good luck. You should be all right. There's a lot of matching and true and false and multiple choice. There's a few short answers, but you should be okay.